Hi guys, Viking Reefing here. Today I wanted to discuss the subject of keeping a large reef tank. My display tank is 1,000 liters, which is, I believe, 265 gallons. It measures 2 meters by 80 centimeters by 65 centimeters. If you want that in inches, you'll have to do the conversions yourself because I can't remember them. And my overall system volume, including the sump and my smaller system, which is all pumped together, is just around 1,800 liters, which I believe is like 475 US gallons, give or take a couple of gallons. So I think I'm fairly well qualified to talk about keeping large reef tanks. Of course, there are people like Adam Sandler who has massive reef tanks, but that's generally not applicable to you nor me for that matter. So I want to go over the pros and cons of a decently sized reef tank. So firstly, we will go over the pros of having a lot of water, basically. The first pro is that it's visually impressive, and that's kind of why we keep reef tanks, because they look good. In my opinion, a decent large reef tank generally looks more impressive than a good smaller reef tank. It just looks more impressive in the room. Guests and things of that nature will also be kind of in awe if you have a very large tank. They'll also find smaller ones interesting, but without knowing the ins and outs of keeping a reef tank, the actual size will just impress people. And me personally, I like a large reef tank as well, because I just like the look of them. The second pro is the choices that it gives you in terms of keeping fish. As you well know, if you have a look in my tank, I have several species with a lot of space requirements. For example, the angels or the regal angel will all generally require fairly large reef tanks once they're fully grown. You can keep things like large tanks. Achilles tanks are a perfect example of that. They just won't do well in a small reef tank. And you can also keep more overall fish, and who doesn't like keeping a lot of fish? Personally, fish is one of the very main passions that I have in the reefing hobby. And you can also build very interesting communities in your tank because you have so much space. You can have larger fish that just swims around in the open, and then you can get little tiny fish just to fill out all the little nooks and crannies throughout your reef. I have several wrasses, I have small damsels, I have a pipe fish in here somewhere. And keeping those kinds of fish in a very large tank kind of play into their more cryptic behaviors and how they act in nature. The third pro of keeping a large reef tank is that you can get away with a lot. Things happen very slowly in so much water. Nutrients tend to rise very slowly. Accumulations of different toxins or pollutants also happens very slowly over time, which gives you a lot of breathing space to react if something is about to go wrong. Very few things can really have a catastrophic effect on a, let's say, 200 gallon or more tank, or like power outages and stuff like that. But again, a large water volume will give you some more time to react to those things also. For example, I do automatic water changes. I change out about 10 liters of water daily, and having so much overall water volume in my system, I don't have to really be precise about the actual salinity of the water that I'm adding. If it's 1.0 to 3 one week or 1.0 to 7 the next week or something, it doesn't really matter because I can I won't be affecting the overall levels overly much if I'm a little bit off. The fourth good thing about having a tank this size is the aquascaping abilities that you have. You can really create interesting aquascapes because you just have so much space to work with. The actual depth of the tank, front to back, really does help in creating interesting and more dramatic aquascape that looks more natural as well. If you have a lot of depth to work with, you can make gradual sloping aquascapes that just looks more pleasing to the eye and it'll just look more natural. In terms of the aquascape, you also get a lot more space to place corals. So if you like buying corals, get a large reef. It'll take forever before you fill it up. Then the last reason for getting a tank this size is just that it's just fun. I mean, don't we all want a really large tank someday? It's just really fun to have a big freaking tank. It gives me a lot of satisfaction to be able to do this, and I'm willing to bet that it would bring a lot of satisfaction to you guys as well, if you're into this sort of thing. Even after a year since getting this, I think it's 1.5 years or something, when I walk down here, every now and again, I just think to myself, this is my tank. I finally have a tank this size. I've had tanks up to like 700 liters and stuff like that before. But once you start entering the territory of 1,000 liters, custom tanks and whatnot, I feel that it's a completely different ball game. And I believe it has a lot to do with like dimensions and things of that nature that just makes it more impressive to you. Downsides. This might really question the appeal of having a tank this size. So I'd say that the probably biggest downside of having a large tank is just the overall cost. If you're planning on building a large tank, let me tell you that, like for example, the tank in and of itself, that's actually fairly cheap. I mean, yes, it'll cost you, but it's a very small part of the equation actually. So things like lighting is shockingly expensive on large tanks. If you thought lighting up a 180 gallon or something like that was expensive, well, try a much larger tank and the cost just goes up exponentially, because the thing is, most of the equipment in this hobby isn't really spec for tanks like this or bigger. Just for example, lighting, I'm very lucky since I have a single fixture and it can illuminate my entire tank. But if I would go with some of the more common options in the hobby, lighting this tank would cost a fortune if you would want to do it properly for SPS, which I obviously want to do. Things like pumps and stuff. I think I'm still good with this size of tank. Normal pumps in this hobby will work well for me, but if I would go up, say 30 or 40% from this size, then I'm going into the really niche pumps, or you have to have a ton of them. I already have a fair few pumps on this tank. For example, I have 4 MP40s on it, and I have 3 Nero 5s providing the flow of the tank. And I'm actually starting to doubt that that's enough, especially as the corals grow in. I'll definitely need more flow in this tank. So if you just do the math, that's a fairly nice chunk of change that you got right there. But the costs, they don't stop at equipment. I believe in water changes, which means that I change out around 70 to 100 liters of water every week in this tank. 70 liters of water is done automatically by my automatic water change system, and I might like gravel back and things like that as well, and I'll suck up some additional water doing that. So salt is actually a real expense. I burn through a lot of salt, and if you're going for premium brands and not using cheap crap, that adds up over the years. Also things like additives, like your standard 2, 3 or 4 part. I'm using a 4 part. That adds up. Electricity is a huge aspect as well. Luckily here in Sweden our electricity prices has gone down recently, but just looking like 6 months ago we had a energy crisis here, like basically all of Europe did. And keeping this tank running, it costs an arm and a leg. Remember that I said that it's a good thing that things happen slowly in big tanks. Well, there's an inverse effect to that as well. If something has really gone awry, like water quality, some levels or whatnot, pollutants, what have you, it takes a lot to steer that ship right again. If, for example, if I had a 200 liter tank and I had some nutrient issues, I could change out like 100 liters easy, and I would cut my nutrients in half. Imagine doing this on this tank. That would mean that I had to change out 900 liters, and that's just not feasible. So to really like counteract stuff that has gone bad, it'll take a lot of work, it'll take a lot of effort, it'll take a lot of time, and in most cases a lot of money as well. So that's something to keep in mind. One thing that you might not think about when thinking about a large tank is just that it can be very difficult to work inside the actual tank. For example, you can see here I have it's a red diamond, I believe, acro something or other. It used to be on the very back of this arch here, and I managed to break it off when I was fiddling around with one of those tongs here, picking up a hermit crab or something that managed to flip over. It's been sitting here for like a week or something, because to get back there and glue it, I basically have to stick my entire arm, like dip my torso into the tank, and I'm a fairly tall guy. I'm 190 centimeters tall, so I believe that's like 6'2" or something. I have a fairly long reach, but even I have trouble reaching. I can reach the bottom by the gauze, but if I want to get further back, that's basically impossible without using a snorkel. So messing around in the tank can be a challenge, and it's very, if you're going for a tank this size, it's extremely important to have good access. I have a friend, he might be watching this video right now. He has a tank, I think it's 2,500 liters or something, and he has a horrid time getting into it because he has a canopy as well and stuff, so he can barely reach into it. So it's always a bitch to do anything in the tank. And I can sometimes put off maintenance just because I know that it's going to be such a chore to do something, like gluing this coral down or something. So that's a reality with keeping large tanks. It would probably be easier if you had a super massive tank where you can just jump in and scuba dive or something in it. Logistics of moving the tank is another thing. So if you're planning on moving in like the, say, next 2 to 3 years or something, I would stay away. I couldn't get this tank through the door, so the shadow overflow box I had to glue myself. When I got it in, I had to remove doors from the frame and everything like that. It was a horrid time. So now once the overflow is glued onto it and everything, this tank isn't leaving this room without me cutting that thing off, and it's probably going to be quite a stretch to get it out intact, I'd say. So probably the most likely scenario if I ever have to move this tank, animal like that, is that I'd probably have to cut this into pieces and reglue it in some other place. Also, you can lose things in large tanks. Let's say that you have a little frag or something. If that's in a 200-300 liter tank and it somehow falls off the rocks, it's generally not that hard to find. I mean, you have a fairly small area to start to look through. If I lose something here, there's tons of nooks and crannies where it can get lost, and I've lost more frags than I would care to admit, just by stupid accidents where they get knocked off somewhere, I can't find them quickly enough, and they just perish. And I think lastly, if you're a perfectionist, where you want everything to be super spotless clean and everything in the right order, and you actually have a job as well, you might go insane if you try to do that on a very large tank. There's always some corner that looks kind of funky. For example, I have some cyan in this corner that I need to get to. My nutrients bombed out, so I'm trying to get them up, which of course is a struggle in a tank this size. So I'm dosing nutrients, I'm feeding like mad, but never mind that. So if you're a neat or clean freak, I'd probably go a bit smaller than this, just because it takes so much time to get everything in perfect order. Oh, I actually just thought of one more thing that I hadn't planned in advance, and that's the inverse of one of the actual pros. Actually, it's you have a lot of room for corals, and if you're not extremely wealthy, it'll take you some time to build up enough corals in your tank to make it look good. It'll probably look barren for quite some time, because I mean, buying corals, filling this up in like a couple of months or even 6 months, that will cost you. So that's also something to keep in mind if you're impatient. You're either going to have to spend a lot of money, work on your patience, or get a smaller tank. And that's it for me. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!